Welcome back, students of fitness, to another episode of the Liftology podcast. Rich and Joe back with you today, and today's topic I thought that we should have up for discussion is programming and the basics of programming, setting yourself up for a routine that works for you. And Joe, I thought I could toss it to you on what that entails.
Sure. So, basically, to set up a program, we're going to talk about how many days we're going to be training, cycles, what split we're going to be following, incorporating warm up, and lastly, and very generally, we'll touch on nutrition.
Okay. All of those topics will be listed below, and they will be timestamped for you. That being said, I think we should just get right into it, talking about the days, right? How many days you have available. Not to squeeze your workout in. Right?
Correct. I think the better approach is to determine how many days you have workout and design a program around that versus looking for one of these pre-made programs that says you have to work out 4 or 5 days and trying to cram that into your schedule.
Yeah, I think with that you'll get something similar to like that resolution burnout where everyone hits everything as hard as they can. While we don't want to discourage anybody from working out, it is important to pace it and make sure that it works with, like I said, your schedule, right? Especially in what, I mean, everyone has wonky work weeks, but like whatever fits in your work week. And then as far as squeezing time on the weekend, I think anybody is like, you can commit to that, but you have to know yourself. If you know you're not gonna get up to go, don't lie to yourself about it.
Correct.
If you have the free time and you know that you can get there, then put it in.
Yeah, and it just goes back to what you said about like a New Year's resolution. You make this New Year's resolution to go to the gym 6-7 days a week, and every time you don't go, you feel like a failure. You feel like you failed. You missed what you were trying to accomplish, and we don't want to set ourselves up for failure. We want to set ourselves up for success. So if you know you realistically only have 3 days to go to the gym and work out or do an at-home workout, whatever the case may be, program for those 3 days. If it's 2, it's 2. If it's 4, great, right? But do what you can. This way, every week feels like a small victory as opposed to a small defeat.
And in regards to the weekends too, I think that's not something you necessarily have to program right away. Like if you're just beginning too, right? Just do the work days for a little bit. Get like you said, small victories. Get yourself set up for success, and then after a period of time, if you feel like, hey, I'm doing well with this, maybe then is the time to try to squeeze it in on days that you have off.
Yeah. Yes. That's pretty much it, right? It's just not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
Right? Program according to your schedule, not vice versa. So from there, I want to touch on the cycles of programming. Cycles of programming being a macro cycle, a meso cycle, and a micro cycle. Macro being the biggest. So that's kind of goal oriented.
Yeah.
You have to be realistic with your time settings, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a goal of losing 60 pounds, if you have a goal of putting on 30 pounds of muscle, you can't set up your macro cycle to be 2 months. It's not going to work.
I mean, even with that, setting up macro cycles, I feel, would be better to make several macro cycle goals, right? If you're looking to put on 30 pounds of muscle or lose 30 pounds of fat, making a macro cycle like 3 months to put on 10 pounds of muscle or lose 10 pounds of fat. And then like, okay, after I reach this goal, then we address the next macro cycle.
Correct. Yeah.
Just because it's a big goal doesn't mean it should be the whole goal.
Sure. Now it's going to be different depending on if you're training for competition or if you're training for a general goal. Competition, obviously, your macro cycle is the year, right? It's everything leading up to the competition or the sport, that how the duration of that competition or sport, and then kind of resetting again for the next
off-season recovery,
and then getting back into it,
getting the strength programming back up, because you don't typically train to get stronger faster
Jeremy.
mid-season.
Yeah. And again, I think it's just, think big for a macro cycle. Think long term, right? You don't want to really set up, 10 macro cycles in a given year, right? You want it maybe
Oh yeah,
two
no,
or
I mean,
three.
yeah, like I said, setting up 2 or 3, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm talking in terms of months and
Months.
months, not
Correct.
weeks,
Correct.
but also not a full year.
Yeah.
Like, say you have a 3-4 month macro cycle.
Yeah.
Or 4 3 months, like something along those lines.
Yeah. I think.
But I mean, you could also put the macro being the end goal.
The end goal, right? So if your end goal is to, again, say, lose 50 pounds versus gain 30 pounds of muscle, that's your big long-term goal. You can break it down into 3 general macro cycles of 4-month periods of, okay, over these 4 months, my goal is to lose 15 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
and then 15 pounds, and then 10 pounds, and then 10 pounds. So,
and then from there, right, you go from the big macro cycle to the true macro cycle, and then from there, you go into the mesocycle,
correct.
which is the phase of your program, like which phase of the program you're in, depending on like what you're doing, right? If you're training for strength, hypertrophy, power,
Yeah.
and along the lines with macro cycles, all 3 of those are typically in programs, like where they can be depending on what your goals are, right? You could be like, okay, the first mesocycle. I'm sorry, did I say macro? The first mesocycle would be something like power, then strength and hypertrophy in those phases of your macro cycle.
Yeah.
Mesocycle is those phases.
Yeah. So I think in general, it's good to think of like your first mesocycle as a preparatory
Foundational.
foundation, right? You're getting your body ready for more intense workouts later on.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of important to note that intensity and volume have an inverse relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't do very high intense workouts at a very high volume.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of common sense in that area. If you're going to lift your 1 rep max, you cannot lift it for 5 reps. So your volume is going to
literally
decrease.
In the phrase.
Yes, in the phrase 1 rep max, it means you're going to lift that weight 1 time.
Mm-hmm.
At a very high intensity, you're going to lift that weight 1 time.
Yeah.
So the beginning phases are going to be the higher volume, and then the latter phases are going to be the increase in intensity and a decrease, followed by a decrease in volume because it's necessary.
Yeah.
And then
in like a deloading type phase.
Yeah, that's kind of programmed in rest.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is also important.
Yeah. And then
as covered in our previous video about rest.
Yeah. It should be built into everything. How many days a week you're going to work out, making sure that you set up ample time. As intensity increases, making sure you're increasing your rest time. The last part of that being the microcycle, which is your daily plan. You can look at it as week to week.
Week to week, what you play, like given your days that you have, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's 2, 3, 4. Some people don't have 2, 3, or 4. Some people just train every other day.
Yep.
That's again what you have available to you. But the microcycle, like you said, is that daily / weekly, right? Because if you're planning for the future, right, you're not just planning one day, planning multiple days.
Yep.
So the microcycle technically could be the week, right? And based on that, right, your microcycle, that's when you work in your progressive overloads, right?
Correct.
So when you're talking about
that's where
prepping and foundational work,
that's where that week to week mentality comes in, right? Because in the second week should not be an exact duplicate of your first week, right? We want that progressive overload. So whether you're increasing the amount of reps or increasing the weight used, you're increasing some metric each week, making the workouts more challenging. Again, the idea behind that preparatory phase is to get your body ready for those higher intensity workouts. So yeah, you know, I think that pretty much covers it for the cycles. I don't want you to get. I don't want people to be so hung up on, what cycle am I in and everything.
Yeah. No, that's just
It's just
that's losing the forest through the trees type thing.
it's just about knowing your end goal and
Mhm.
breaking it down into the steps how you're going to reach that goal.
Yeah, right. Macro being the end goal, meso being the short periods where your focus is a little smaller, and then micro even smaller than that. And based on your micro cycle is going to actually take us into the next topic, which was setting your splits, right? And there's different examples of splits, and all these splits are, again, this all comes together, right?
Yeah.
The days you have available, the cycle that you're going through, and based on that, you set, like, based on, like I said, your microcycle. That's when you set your splits, which can be.
Yeah, I mean, you can do a 2-day split, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, up to 5 days a week. I would say, okay. You don't need to work out 6 or 7 days a week. You don't. You can basically do.
We're talking for general population too.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you should do nothing. I'm just saying, don't be like, oh, well, it's my day off. I'm going to lay in bed for 14 hours today, right? Like, you're gonna get up, you're gonna do stuff.
But also don't feel guilty.
Yeah,
that you have a day off.
You need that time for recovery. And I just think realistically, just you'd want to avoid the point of diminishing returns, right? Right. So when you exercise, basically in the beginning, especially for a newbie, in the beginning, you're going to see pretty rapid gains. And I think, diminishing returns in terms of the individual workout and also over time, right? So you're going to see gains in the beginning that your body is going to adapt to and eventually kind of taper off a little bit. And that's when you start to hit plateaus.
And that's where you talk about progressive overload, where, like, your muscle, what the hell is that? Your muscle gain will not be those beginner gains that you got.
Yeah.
But if you don't continue to progressively overload.
Yeah, but sometimes so with the point of diminishing returns, sometimes increasing that load at a certain point, you can't increase it to get the same gains, right? That's the diminishing return.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you
but
see,
it's still important to keep continually.
Yeah, and when that starts to happen, that's when it's a good time to kind of shift your focus, shift your phase, right? That's kind of when we were talking about mesocycles. Once you've reached that point where the gains you're getting from the workout are significantly smaller than they were 6 weeks ago.
I think it's important to note not necessarily gains, but more just benefits, right?
Yeah.
Because power and speed can be in one of those mesocycles.
Yeah.
Which isn't going to be muscle gains, but you're going to notice the rate at which you're improving your speed or power.
Yeah. And it holds true for speed. I mean, it's the same thing. If you think of somebody who's never sprinted before versus Usain Bolt, okay? The person who starts to train to be like Usain Bolt is going to see those gains come rapidly in the beginning, very rapidly. Whereas Usain Bolt could do the same exact workout as you did and shave 1,000th of a second off of his time. Whereas
which would actually be big for him.
Yeah. Whereas you might have shaved 3 full seconds off of your time. Right. And that's what the diminishing returns are. The more the closer you get to achieving the goal of what you're specifically training for, the harder it is to make significant gains. It doesn't mean to stop trying, it just means you have to start changing things up.
Yeah. And not changing things up in the sense of one of my least favorite things is muscle confusion.
Oh yeah. Got to keep the body guessing.
That's not the same as changing up your program.
Correct.
Yeah. Not one I like particularly.
Yeah.
But
So
the important part with this, I'm sorry to cut you off, is reaching 20 sets over a week with like not necessarily a pattern, but a muscle group for those diminished.
yeah.
What you were talking about.
Yeah. So we set that benchmark at 20 total working sets to increase muscle size, right? That's essentially what we're going for. We want to be stronger because having that foundational strength is going to, in the long run, improve every other aspect of your training.
Yeah.
Right. So
everything works in conjunction with each other. Like,
yeah. And
if you improve your strength, you'll get faster.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you said, breaking it down, not necessarily by exact pattern, but like general area targeted, right? So if you're doing vertical pull one day and horizontal pull another day,
they're two separate patterns, but they're both
targeting this similar area.
Your back,
yeah, exactly.
as a whole.
Yeah, so I'm not expecting people to go out and do 20 sets of a combination of pull-ups, pull-downs, chin-ups, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then another 20 sets of rowing type stuff, right? That's a huge amount of volume. Don't need that much. But if you do 10 and 10, right, then you're kind of in that 20 working set range.
I mean, 10 and 10, you could, depending on how you set it up, it could just be 2 exercises.
Absolutely.
It could be like 5 sets of 5 or something of rows and pull-ups. Then later in the week, do it again.
Yeah.
There's 20.
Absolutely. It's not necessarily a hard number to hit. It's just a general number you want to keep in the back of your mind. Obviously, if you go over, it's not the end of the world, right? Just remember, more isn't necessarily always better. Again, going back to diminishing returns, get to 20, great. You get to 25, awesome. If you're starting to do 35, 40, 45 sets, targeting an individual muscle,
you're not going to get anything back from what you put in.
In
fact, the work you're putting in. And it's also important to note, I think, that just because you didn't reach those 20 doesn't mean you shouldn't do 18.
Yeah.
Like you should still, like if you're just beginning, still doing things and getting yourself ready. Like this is for people that are a little bit more than a few weeks into the.
Yes. I have no problem with complete beginners. Literally, just targeting a general muscular area, meaning pulling, whether it be vertical or horizontal. 2 sets one day, 2 sets another day. For somebody who's just starting, that's pretty significant, and they're going to feel the soreness, right? So it is important to note experience
which isn't necessarily
level.
Indicative of a good workout.
No, it's just
that's something we could cover.
It's just something that happens in the beginning, right? That same workout, if you were to repeat it 6 months into your training program, is not going to make you sore, right?
Might not even make you break a sweat.
Yeah, realistically. So yeah, and again, not going over, not doing so many sets targeting the same area because after diminishing returns, you start to get negative returns, right? Overtraining, you start to feel the fatigue, your motivation decreases. You don't want to work
then
out.
You stop going to the gym.
Yeah, so we want to avoid that.
No bueno.
Yeah.
But talking about that workout down the road, still just just getting your heart going at that point. I think it's important to talk about the warm-ups like you said in the beginning, because that get that sweat going is important in your workouts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Preventing injuries, right?
Of course, preventing injuries
is loose
is key, right? because once you get a significant injury, it derails the whole thing, right? So once you have your days, and you can break your year up or your 6 months up into your cycles, you know exactly what you're going to do. Then you plan your workouts. Okay, this is the pattern on this is what I'm going to do day 1, this is what I'm going to do day 2, this is what I'm going to do day 3. Great, you have all that. Now it's important to have a warm up for each of those days. And when I say warm up, I don't consider just getting on a treadmill for 3 minutes at a mild walk a warm up, right?
For
General
some
rule,
people, that's what they did to get into the gym.
yeah. I mean, general rule of thumb: if you're not sweating a little bit, right? If you don't have that little bit of sweat starting at the end of your warm up, you're not warmed up. By definition, warm, right? You
Yeah.
got to be warm.
You're supposed to raise your core temperature.
Yeah.
Your core temperature. You start to feel the blood flow, get a little sweat going, and it's important, like you said, to just get one going in general.
Yep.
But when you're programming for yourself, this is when you get into the real thick of it, where you want to warm up based on what you're working that day, like what your daily goals are,
Yeah.
right? And why don't you tell everyone what a typical warm up, not necessarily the things you
I know
do
what you're
as a
saying.
warm
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, if you want to start on like a treadmill, elliptical, something to just kind of get the blood flowing a little bit, 3 to 5 minutes, that's all you really need, right? From there, I like to get into some dynamic stretches, right?
Okay. And dynamic meaning as opposed to like static.
Yeah, so
Static is what everyone is pretty much
when
used
people think
to.
of static stretching, they think of like, pulling your leg back, doing a hamstring stretch,
Mm-hmm.
and hanging out there for 30 seconds to a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's been shown that you can actually cause your nervous system to wind down by static stretching, and therefore, if you're going into something that's high intensity immediately after,
Yeah.
power output's going to be down, risk for injury goes up. So we do
Because the central nervous system is actually responsible.
Yeah.
In like, well, you're I'm not sorry, isn't responsible so much as you also want to make sure you're prepping your central nervous rather than winding it down.
Yeah.
That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, so with dynamic stretches, basically you're going through kind of a range of motion in a pattern similar to something you'd be training for that day, right?
Yeah,
Um,
getting them ready, right? Which
yeah,
is what a warm up is, but you're talking about specifically goal oriented warming of patterns that you're going to accomplish.
yes, yeah. So definitely, dynamic stretching, doing some kind of mobility to increase the range of motion.
Mm-hmm.
Again, for
Which you should do that second
yeah, yeah,
because you want to prep and then see if you can get it moving a little bit more.
correct, right? So doing the dynamic stretch first is going to increase your range of motion. Then followed by a mobility drill is going to get you into that new range of motion
And to reinforce it.
and reinforce it. And then from there, doing some kind of activation or something that's going to now challenge that new range of motion, right? Some kind of activation, stability drill,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. I think thinking of it like, and I think it's kind of important to think about mobility. We're not talking about like if you want to get in the gym and hop on a foam roller and do some soft tissue massage first thing, like you can, right?
Yeah.
I don't really necessarily consider that increasing mobility because that's very temporary, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you want to do that first and then go into your dynamic stretches,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay, right? Because now you're going to soften those tissues, you're going to be a little more pliable. You can hit
Mm-hmm.
those dynamic stretches a little bit better.
So
And
basically,
they're going to
you're
be
just
longer lasting.
kind of fixing up what you're saying, where that a dynamic stretching and mobility first, if you can. Not everybody can or like wants to or can tolerate, because sometimes some of the spots that you hit with the roller can be really
Yeah.
and you know what, it's good for you. But if you can't take yourself through it.
Yeah, and again, it's an optional thing. You don't even have to do it.
But for a optimal warm up, you want to start with your foam rolling.
Yeah.
Then go into the dynamic stretching. Then go into mobility work.
Yeah, and again,
and activation after that.
Yeah, and again with mobility, we're talking about mobilizing positions, right? So if you're focusing on, deadlifting one day, right? You want hip mobility, right? In that hip flexion pattern, or hamstring mobility. Well, hamstrings don't really have mobility, but you know what I mean. So basically, like where the femur connects with the hip.
of your hip hinge pattern.
Yeah. Right. So
the hamstrings are involved in that.
Correct.
So you just like might not be making them more mobile. You might just be making them a little warmer.
Yeah.
A little bit more flexible
and able to get into that position.
To delineate the differences between mobility and flexibility.
Yeah.
Not at this time. Cover that another time. But and then the activation.
So
but it's important to note, I think, that this warm up is just general preparedness, right?
Correct.
Getting yourself ready for the workout as a whole doesn't take away from the part. I think you still have to do your warm up sets.
Absolutely.
Of what you're doing.
100%. Especially if when you get into those later phases where the intensity is going to be high, you don't want to jump into your
just crank out a 225 bench press right out of the gate.
Yeah, like there's definitely going to be that 2 or 3, and depending on how advanced you really are. I mean, sometimes people do 4 or 5 warm up sets. You're building up to big weights.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen like a powerlifting type thing.
Yeah,
they do a lot of work before they get into their working sets.
Yeah,
but that's important for them because, like I said before, central nervous system is a big player in these things, especially something like a deadlift.
Yeah. So just to break it down, beginners versus expert level. Beginners, you may only need 2 warm-up sets, right?
Yeah.
Expert level, you might need 5, maybe 6. You're gradually building up to that heavy load.
Yeah, and like again, it depends on what cycle you're into.
Yeah.
Right? Because you could be training for, in this particular cycle, you're trying to hit your 1 rep max.
Yeah.
Your warm up for a 1 rep max will be substantially different.
Correct.
Than like working sets of something of like 3 sets of 8 to 12.
Yeah. Very different.
Because the volume's lower, but the intensity.
Yeah.
Like you said, the inverse relationship of the two.
Yeah. So, I actually heard somebody say a quote to me once, and it was it holds true for beginners, right? It's better to have a warm-up routine that's the same every day and get really, really good at it than in the beginning trying to change it every single day.
Oh yeah.
Right?
No, I find like it's not just with warm-ups. I mean, it is with warm-ups, right? But also again, the muscle confusion, right? Doing 85 different exercises isn't going to make it necessarily better.
Yeah.
Like you'll do more, maybe, depending on what you're doing. It might not be good though. Completing the exercises that you have to complete better, I think, is more important than having a wide variety of the exercises that you do.
Yes. That is, and that holds true for warm-up as well as your work.
That's kind of why I mentioned it there.
Yeah. So having a warm-up of 5 or 6 dynamic movements that are high quality movements, doing those before every warm up, as long as they're varied, doing those same 5 or 6 every single workout is going to be more beneficial than trying to change it every time, and you're not so good at some things, and so it's better to do a decent warm up perfectly than a great warm up kind of haphazardly. Yeah.
And then I think that brings us to our all-encompassing factor, like what comes next is important with everything. We covered it with the women putting on muscle.
Yep.
And this isn't going to be the last time we talk about it, right? Nope. You already know what's coming. It's nutrition.
Yeah. So just like with anything, nutrition is the fuel that runs the car, right? So I had heard this great analogy. It was basically, if you take a car, the workout is the engine of the car, right? It's what drives the progress.
Mm-hmm.
Without the good fuel, the engine suffers, your workouts suffer,
Mm-hmm.
car doesn't work as efficiently. And vice versa, if you take the engine away and have the best fuel in the world, you're still not going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So they are dependent on each other. But with that being said, your nutrition has to be good. Not saying it has to be perfect, doesn't have to be, you don't have to have the most optimal nutrition in the world, but it has to be good.
Yeah. I mean, we're all guilty of it. We're all humans, right?
Yes.
I don't know if you could attest to it. I can certainly tell you that if you eat garbage for a few days and you try to work out, I don't know about you. I notice it. I know huge
Yeah.
difference.
I had a donut
Huge
for
difference.
lunch today. I already feel terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. But having that one donut as opposed to just eating crap, right?
Yeah.
You could have that donut, then work out after dinner tonight,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if you eat like a clean meal, does not necessarily have to be a clean or a lean meal, like broccoli, brown rice, and chicken,
Oh,
like
yeah.
the old bodybuilder special.
Yeah.
But there's a reason that's there.
Yeah.
It works. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not varied, and you want to make sure that your nutrition not only like it comes back to what we're talking about with how many days you can commit. You have to commit to something that you can do, right?
Correct.
You're like, I'm going to eat salmon every day. No, it's not. That's not sustainable.
Nobody's eating salmon every single day. Yeah.
But you want to make sure you have like your needs that you need to reach, right? With all the macronutrients that you have.
Yep.
They could be a little off. Doesn't have to be perfect,
Correct.
but just a general healthy diet
Yeah.
where you're having your proteins, your carbohydrates, your fats, and just fueling the body the way you need it.
Yeah. And like you said, just be on that upward trajectory, right? Like if your diet is good and not great, as long as you're trending in the right direction,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna feel it in your workouts, right?
And you'll find it that when you move forward, when you're doing these things, right, your diet isn't perfect right out of the gate. You start to fine tune it, gets better, your workouts get better. This isn't necessarily with everybody, but your workouts get better, you eat better. Your workouts get even better. It becomes cyclical.
Definitely.
And easy to maintain because you're used to doing it. You start toying around with new recipes that work with those macronutrients. It starts to get fun for some people, right?
I hope for all people.
Yeah.
I mean, it really it should be fun, right? And that's the thing. That's why when we discuss nutrition with people, in general, they're like, Saturday nights, me and the wife like to go out and we go to a nice restaurant. Every Saturday night is our date night. I'm like, keep that, right? Like, don't stop having fun in your life because once you associate
punishment with what you're working out, you don't want to do it.
You don't want to do it anymore, right? You're going to give up on your workouts and be like, well, this isn't fun. I have to eat this and I have to eat that and I have to do this workout. Like,
yeah, but depending on the person too, right? Those Saturday nights of wine and bourbon and whatever you're having to eat, suddenly you might find yourself not wanting to do that anymore.
Yeah,
which isn't good or bad because we're not discouraging you from doing it. But you'll notice.
Yeah.
The next morning when you have those drinks.
Yeah, that's what it comes down. It's kind of the experience and the learning that goes throughout this whole process, and it's the difference between going out and having that glass of wine versus having the 3 glasses of wine that you typically might have had,
and then the Taco Bell run after that.
Yeah, yeah, in extreme cases. But you
which is the only acceptable time to have Taco Bell.
2 a.m.
Yes.
Yeah. And And yeah, I just feel like um the important there is an importance on nutrition, but not at the consequence of not enjoying anything.
Yeah,
Right?
resentment, punishment. You got to keep that out
Yeah.
of the way.
So I would love to one day in the near future take a deep dive into nutrition. Don't want to do that today, obviously, but
Yeah, we're covering the programming.
yeah.
So
So,
that
but
is a topic I think we can cover on our own.
yeah, and I think right now the takeaway is what you're eating is going to affect how you're working out. So, trying to understand that they are dependent on each other. Right,
Yeah,
workouts and nutrition have um, a relationship that is word I'm looking
codependent.
for. Codependent. Beautiful. There you go.
I got some twins on the way, so right now, them and the mother are a little codependent right now.
Yeah.
Well, I don't no, not codependent, but whatever.
They're more just dependent, and they will be for a long time.
They sure will be. Uh, but we're getting away from that. Everything else. With all those tools that we gave you today, use them to try to set yourself up for success. You know, take the tools, use them like I just said,
Yeah,
but
and
implement them.
yeah, just remember, you know, consistency is everything. There is no failure, right? If you make a mistake, there's always tomorrow, right? Like
Hmm.
you don't have to be super hard on yourself. Don't look at, a single day of bad eating or a single day of a bad workout. It's not a failure, right? Consistency is the most important thing. You miss one day, m- you can't make it up.
Pick up the next day you can.
Yeah, pick it up the
Shake it
next day
off.
you can. Shake it off. I plan to work out 3 days. I missed a day. I only worked out twice. Is that a failure? No, especially if you're going from working out 2 days a week versus not at all,
Yeah.
right? So it's a victory. So just stay consistent. Do your best, and you're going to see results. It's guaranteed to happen. It's kind of simple math when you think about it.
Yeah. So take all those things we told you, right? The days that you can work, the cycles that you have to work with, right? Macro, meso, micro. Use that to set up your splits, right? Base your warm ups on those splits. Follow a good nutritional diet and make sure you just keep at it.
Keep up the grind.
And until next time, make sure you guys are working out just as smart as you are hard. Catch you later.